Welcome to Disruptor in Chief, a show about the ongoing revolution in higher education. Let's hear from the main man leading the charge at Maryville University. Here's your host, Dr. Mark Lombardi.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Disruptor in Chief. I'm Dr. Mark Lombardi, the president of Maryville University, and I am thrilled today to have one of my favorite people, the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Maryville University. Previously, for about 125 years, the Vice President of Student Life, and that's Dr. Nina Caldwell. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you, Dr. Lombardi. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Great. You know, I'm going to delve into a little bit on your background, but first thing I want to do, freshen our minds, last week, MLK celebration, Dr. Eddie Glaude. Give me your impressions of his speech.
Outstanding. Just a phenomenal speaker, inspiration, motivator, very knowledgeable. He's a scholar, very relatable, right? And so sometimes when you think about an individual, a leader of his caliber, you think that they're far removed from reality or being able to be present with the audience. But one of the things that I really appreciated that he did give the message and the challenge to the community, right? He didn't just come here and speak and leave. He really touched our hearts, and he challenged each of us to the question of, would Dr. King be proud of you in the work that we're doing? And so lots of feedback from the community. They really appreciated this speaker. They'd like to see more of the speaker. I said, well, that's a conversation to be had, right?
There you go. I was ready to let him take over as president of Maryville after his speech. He was so good.
Well, you know, he said, run, right?
Yeah, that's right. He's too smart for to have one of these jobs. No, He was great, and maybe we'll come back to that as we're talking. So, Nina, tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to where you are today.
Wow. Just trying to think of where to even begin with that. Certainly I had a very supportive family. My parents both valued education. They were champions for ensuring that we had numerous opportunities. They made sure that it was very clear in our home that you were to go to college. They wanted us to go to college. I had teenage parents, and so they wanted their children to go further than they did. And so that was something that was really important. Now, for me, it was a lot easier than my brother. And so I loved education. And eventually he came along because he too is in higher ed as a faculty member. But, you know, it was important for us. We learned many lessons in the community, within our churches. We had a village. When they say it takes a village to raise a child, in our community, that the village was there in all aspects. And so we saw all walks of life. They imparted on us that you have a choice in terms of the path that you were going to take and the decisions that you would make, and that ultimately you were responsible for your choices. And so for me, going off to college, being the first in my family and my extended family, and going to HBCU was very different. When there was a big university just a throne's throw away from my neighborhood. But my mom...
Really? You lived near Purdue University? Really?
University of Illinois.
Oh,
just
okay.
Saying.
I just assumed. Okay.
Purdue wasn't too far, though. But going to a historically black college and university really helped to shape me. And my mom knew very well what type of institution I needed. I needed a smaller institution, very similar to Maryville. It was small. The students knew my name. It was very family-oriented. I had not visited the campus, but we took the word of some trusted professionals, and that's where I started.
So you went to Dillard, in that quiet, sleepy little community of educational community known as New Orleans, Louisiana, right?
Absolutely.
So you weren't really roughing it when it came to
No,
great education and great nightlife, right?
I wasn't roughing it, but there was education to be had on the campus and off the campus. I'll say that. But, you know, I had a rough time. I was a great student in high school, but I didn't know what college life was. I thought it was high school. And so there I was with 18 and 19 credits and just fell right on my face. And eventually I got my stride and got back into my academics. and changed my major from nursing to education. I knew I always wanted to help people, but my father worked in a hospital, and so that's what I knew. And I had taken some classes in high school that put me on that health professions path, but that didn't work out for me. And being a spiritual person, I landed where God wanted me to be in education. And once I was a school teacher in New Orleans, it was amazing. I taught inner city children and families. I loved it. And then I knew I wanted a higher calling of going into administration and being a principal of an elementary school. Once I got in higher ed at ISU, there was no turning back. And I found student affairs and loved it. And I realized that I could teach, I could be a counselor, I could be an administrator. And here I am 30 plus years later, still in higher ed and still loving it.
And obviously for, I guess, close to 20 years, you've been here at Maryville University,
Yes.
and for almost all of that time as heading up VP of Student Life. Talk about the job of a VP of Student Life. I say many times it's a tougher job than my job most of the time. And we used to joke around when I'd see on my cell phone Nina's name come up on a Saturday night. I know she wasn't calling me to see what the weather forecast was. She was telling me about some crisis, some challenge. So talk about student life and how it's evolved in your time.
Oh my goodness. So student life, when I think about the profession, and it certainly has evolved as you mentioned, and I think about me first coming here to Maryville, and that we had a much smaller student body. Our diversity of student demographics wasn't as it is today.
We're going to talk about that.
Thanks to your leadership. But the commitment to being student-centered was always there. And I think that's at the heart of student life. And you really get to see the evolution of students. And so having them come in as first-year students, they're all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. They really don't know what it is. And I tell them it's not 13th grade. This is your first year as a college student. And to see them come in and what they want that experience to be, or just them being open to those ideas. But the other part of not only that, they have a life that is evolving and changing. They're beginning to learn who they are. And there are also these experiences that come about in terms of the decisions and choices and what their values are, right? When they come in, they certainly have been grounded with their beliefs and their values from their families, their upbringing, their experiences. But once they get to a college campus, that's an opportunity for them to really have the question answered of why do I believe that? Why do I have these values? To step outside their comfort zone and to grow as a student, that's the thing that I love, that being on a college campus and being a part of that as a vice president, that you step in and you get to see the evolution of that student just growing and develop before your eyes. The other side of that is sometimes students are in crisis and they find themselves in situations and circumstances that either happen to them because of choices they made, or they just happen because life happens, right? And how do you help them in those moments of need? How do you have a sense of empathy to help guide them and provide them with the support that they need as a student? And I love the fact that one of the things that strike me in doing this work is you never know the impact that you're having on someone. And a simple hello, the recognition of seeing someone across campus. I had a young person tell me one time that they had been battling with cancer. I did not know that. But every day I saw that student, I would say, hello, good morning, how are you? I had no idea. And it wasn't until probably a year later that student came up. She said, you know what, Dr. Caldwell, I'm leaving, but I want to let you know that it made such a difference that you spoke when you saw me. So sometimes it's the simplest things. And I think being in student life and being a vice president for student life, it really is A to Z. You don't know what your day is going to entail. It's how do you feel that day? How do you be present with students? How do you be able to scan the room and the campus to be able to see the unseen, right? How do you plan for and be prepared for things that are happening outside of the institution, that's happening in the world, because those things do happen and come to the front door of the institution. And so you have to be almost all things to all people in a lot of ways when you think about the student experience as a VP.
Well, when you came to Maryville here in St. Louis, And Maryville University was, shall we say, a predominantly white institution.
Yes.
I know you and I have talked. When I came here and interviewed in 2007, I thought I was interviewing at the University of Denmark or Norway, because it was not a diverse campus. And you've been instrumental in helping this campus become more diverse. Not there yet, but more diverse, more representative, more equitable, more inclusionary. And you've been on the front lines of that in student life. So how, as a VP of all the students, that you also at the same time have been such a force for diversifying the campus over those many years in student life, and then we'll get to the transition into your current role.
Yeah. Oh, God. I think much of my passion and desire and commitment to DEI, no matter the role, the chair I sit in, the title that I may have, I think it's just something that's embedded in me from just my upbringing. I watched my parents believe in second chances. I watched my parents be there and provide assistance to others. I've watched my family bring others along. I've watched my family open doors for others. And so for me, no matter where I've been, in my career, my parents have also said that you need to be present, that you need to be a part of that community. Where are you making a difference? How are you making an impact? And so when I came to St. Louis, and I really felt like Maryville was like in the city, I hadn't really done my full homework. I just looked at the address. And when I got out here, I was like, oh, this is a lovely school. This is great. I'm back in the suburbs. And I began very quickly in my observation of the commitment that faculty had, the quality of education, and I looked around and I'm like, we need to allow more students of color to have access to this amazing experience. So for me, right away, being here at Maryville, I knew this was a special place, and I knew it was a place where all students could thrive. And so with that, when you came along, because as I said, I was getting ready to transition possibly to another opportunity, and it had nothing to do necessarily with Maryville, but it was more about my own professional development. And you provided me an opportunity to have a seat at your table and on your administrative team to talk about how we can be more present as relates to access and opportunity. And so for me, because I knew the quality of what existed here, I then began to create some partnerships in the St. Louis community, and we began to do some things with faculty, staff, and external partners where we could begin to open up the door, so to speak, to the campus to become more diverse in its relationships. And with that, I've watched things grow and evolve, which has been absolutely phenomenal. And so it's really played out in a way that I saw it in my head when I came here 19 years ago. And that is just so reassuring and gratifying to see that we've evolved in this institution that not only talks about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how important access and opportunity is for all, that we're actually doing the work.
So let's talk about that. I remember roughly, maybe 2 years ago, you came to me and said, essentially, you were ready to transition, and I don't know. And we've never really gotten into this specifically, and we don't have to, but coming out of the pandemic and just a whole host of things that student life was on the front lines of in terms of students and their connection or disconnect socially and all the things that were going on during that period in young people's lives. And then, of course, how the student life staff had to cope with that, which may have been one of the most difficult and incredible transitions for any staff in any university to deal with. And then you came to me and said, hey, I really am interested in maybe switching gears and moving into the DEI space. And up until that time, we hadn't had a vice president of DEI. And I think I had said to you, well, if we ever do, you're the person who's going to end up doing it. So it worked out great. But as you were thinking about that transition and now you're in it and you're doing a lot of the things, you're continuing some of the things you've done before, but you're building on those with some amazing new initiatives. What is it about that transition that you've learned both about DEI and also the work that still needs to be done here at Maryville, the significant work that still needs to be done here.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful, certainly, for the opportunity to be able to continue to be in the work that, I'm so passionate about out in the community, and it's connected to working with young people. But as I think about my work with faculty and staff, and that was a great part of that, and working with colleagues as a Vice President of Student Life, having those relationships has helped tremendously in being able to go in and to sit down and create strategies and tactics where we're able to really grow and build upon some foundational pieces that already exist for the university, because we've been doing the work. But this role that you've created, I think, really allows us to dig deeper and work with faculty and staff, and to take a look at how we can be even more intentional and deliberative as it relates to our DEI efforts and our work, and then to be able to identify what are the outcomes that we want. How do we provide the evidence to show the markers of what it is that we're trying to do and that we are doing, and how we can continue to excel with regard to that. The fact that I get to partner with the CTL, which is great, which is the Center for Teaching and Learning, which teaching and learning is very core to the university. The fact that one of our core values for Maryville is diversity and inclusion, and that our strategic plan is built around the evolution of access and opportunity, right? And so how do we revolutionize, education? And we talk a lot about that. And I love being able to have those very deep, thought-provoking conversations that are not just surface level, but it really gets down to the meaning of how do institutions play a role, hold themselves accountable, but really embrace the whole idea and notion of our responsibility as an institution of higher learning, that diversity and inclusion is at the center of all of that. And so I'm grateful to be a part of that.
Well, let's dig down a little bit, because you and I have talked, I know, at length, and we've done this at the senior level, about a number of things that, and let me backtrack, because a lot of institutions think that diversity and equity inclusion is about, well, we're going to hire so many people of color, we're going to recruit so many, and we're going to be done. But obviously that's just one surface level approach. And so let's talk about some of those things. I know we're doing a lot of great work, and you're leading this in bias and unconscious bias. Talk a little bit about how that plays itself out, and what you can do to really drill down on that in a community.
Yeah. I'm really glad that, we are really serious about taking the opportunity to drill down into various aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion. And so one of those is focusing on conscious and unconscious bias, and taking it to the root level, because we all have bias, right? It's just a part of the human condition. And that being such, we oftentimes don't take a step back to say, what are mine? Why do I have them? And how do I confront them? Or even within a team, when they do rise up in a conversation, in meetings, encounters that we have with one another, how do we know how to address those? How do we have conversations? How do we get to a level where we're more comfortable having those conversations? People are at different levels. And so having the opportunity to go into various departments and work with teams collectively, one-on-one, across divisions, across the campus, to have those touch points and have those meaningful conversations where individuals can be reflective, self-reflective, but then they can also look at it based on their teams, and then how does that impact the work that we do, right? I think the one thing that makes an institution or any organization stronger is that you have individuals that have a sense of commitment to DEI, but also are willing to do the work. And so going in, I'm able to meet with the teams, and I'm excited about that because we have a number of trainings that are taking place this month, and we've already done some trainings, and the feedback has been extremely positive. People have appreciated the fact that we've broken up into smaller groups, subsets, if you will, to go in and to have them be able to talk about the things that they've learned, the things that they need to unlearn, things that are really frustrating to them, but provide them with the tools and resources that can assist them to be able to navigate and really create a better work environment for themselves and for their colleagues, and ultimately also for our students.
And I also think too, as we drill down into this, there are a number of different concepts that I think some people are not as familiar or aware of, but they have to be talked about and examined. One of them is intersectionality and the whole idea that people are possessing of multiple identities.
Absolutely.
Whether it's as a woman, as an African American, as a male, as white, as what have you, and that all those identities, or the mixture of them, shall we say, impact people's roles and lives within. So how do you find that those conversations that we're having and will have are difficult to have? Are they illuminating for people? How would you talk about that aspect?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm finding is that people enjoy having space to have conversations. We don't do it enough. And so when we can present those spaces for us to come together to have conversations and for you to get to know me and me to get to know you, because a lot of times what people think, assumptions that they make is based on our outer appearance. And that's it. It's just very surface. And so when we get the opportunity to really get to know one another, that then you begin to see the intersectionalities of who we are and how we identify. Because the assumptions a lot of times will get in the way in how we think people identify or what's important to them, what they value. We base that on assumptions, and that's how I engage with you. And that's where the disconnect and the disruptions oftentimes take place, and the synergy is lost, or the opportunity to have that synergy and productivity and being able to move forward and have successes within groups, within organizations, because you can have the diversity there, but if there's not the understanding, that's where there can be the misstep.
This is kind of and I'm curious your thoughts on this because I've been doing a lot of reading on this. We're operating with a student population that are incredibly creative and inquisitive and all those things, but we also know through research, and this isn't mine or your research, this is research in psychology and so forth, that they're not fully matured emotionally and socially. In fact, you talked about being in student life and how part of the reward is to help them mature. So how do you have conversations and how do you illuminate these issues for 18 to 22-year-olds at a time when they are still exploring their own identity and discovering their own place, and they may not be as anchored as, say, some 40 or 50-year-old?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So one of the things I know that I've tried to do in my time in higher ed is to really explain to young people that college isn't just about getting a degree. It's not about just getting a job. It really is about self-discovery, learning who you are, but also understanding and learning the world in which you live in. And so taking the opportunities to explore things that you haven't explored before, that it would be a disservice to be the same person that you were freshman year that you are when you're a senior. And so how do you take advantage of an experience, an environment, a community that is very diverse, that is very rich, that's right at your fingertips, that can provide you with an array of experience where you can begin to really peel back the layers in understanding of you, others, and the world. And so through that, if they take the opportunity to really embrace what the collegiate experience provides for them, that the whole world will be open and they'll have a better understanding of themselves and also how they'll be beginning to step into the world in their profession.
Okay, so here's the curveball for you. Doing all that great work, and again, you've been on the front lines of this for many, many years and now leading it here at Maryville. How do you do that at the same time out there in the broader culture? The work of DEI is under attack. It's under attack in local communities, in K through 12, in higher ed, at the states, various states around the country, not all but some. Certainly here in Missouri it is. How do you do that when the very concepts and values behind what you're doing, what we're doing here, are under attack?
Oh, wow. I think one of the things that, comes to mind is from our speaker last week with Dr. Glau, and he says democracy is on the line. And so it's how do we continue to push forward? How do we continue to see individuals? But how do we also make sure that we are providing a space for conversation, for dialogue in these turbulent times that we are facing, where there is certainly a push against DEI work? But how do we stay true to the essence of who we are as an institution? How does Maryville stay true to its mission, its core values, its tradition, its history, right? So we've been committed to this work, right? The Sacred Heart, we've been committed to this work. And so making sure that we don't lose that. We're quite aware of what is happening and what is occurring, right? How does that impact us as a university? How do we continue to push forward, so to speak, in a way that the university remains committed to the work and having conversations? I think the dialogue and the fact that we have spaces where we can be very authentic and transparent with students, with our colleagues, with our partners about Maryville and where we stand on that. And I think your leadership speaks volumes to that, and the council, the president's council. I think that's important as well. But we have to continue to be aware of what is happening in other sectors of society as well, because we're one small part of that, a very important part of that, right? We have a responsibility, we have an obligation to our community, whether that's in the recruiting space, the hiring space, those who are helping to lead the institution, our students, right? And so it's important for us to be aware, but also to make sure that we're staying true to our mission, our values, and our vision as an institution.
Well, and there's embedded behind all of it is a recognition of history and the history of this country, and both the challenges, the horrific legacy of slavery and segregation, as well as the triumphs of a country that has been on the road to democracy for hundreds of years. So how do you, and you mentioned working with the Center for Teaching and Learning, it seems to me there's a deep underlying connection here between the social and educational and set of values that DEI represents, and also the historical facts, right, and the educational facts that are embedded there, and there's always there's always a segment of the population that wants to reject the facts, right?
Yes.
Reasonable people can have a long and lengthy debate about every kind of policy you can think of, tax policy or immigration policies or whatever, but really when you're talking about the historical facts, the history is history.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And it can't or shouldn't be redone. So how do you cope with that aspect, particularly as you're interacting with faculty and staff and students?
I giggle because it's come up, right? It has come up. And I think we would be doing a disservice to act like there's a lot of ugliness in our history that took place. And some of it still takes place, to be honest. And so what we're not going to do, and I think is a disservice to an institution or organization if they are not willing to speak about the truths of our history, because it is what it is. And so when I'm asked or discussed about what do you mean by diversity, right, that, we're not just going to talk about race. And I said, no, we're not going to just talk about race, but we are going to talk about race. Because in this country, race is important. It is essential. And I think it oftentimes colorizes most of people's perceptions, their thoughts, their interactions. And so I don't want people to always feel like they need to be comfortable in the conversation, because I oftentimes find that the most growth is when you are uncomfortable. And getting to a place where people are willing to talk about some of those issues that that were horrific. When you think about history, and to not repeat itself, and that's part of it, to not repeat it, is to call it out and to talk about it, right? And to figure out how we're going to do things differently. And how do we, now that we're here, our responsibility to be a part of doing things differently.
Yeah, Dr. Glaude said something in his speech when he was talking about some approaches to diversity, which were kind of superficial, and talking about, well, we're going to bring people of color to the table, and how can you invite me to my own table?
Absolutely.
And I thought that was a powerful.
That was pretty profound. Yes.
Yeah, very powerful statement. So what are your goals going forward? What do you see, not just over the next few months, but over the next 35 years that you're in this role?
35 years. Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow.
Better let Derek know it's going to be another 35 years.
I know. He probably would be okay with that. Oh, wow. In terms of when I think about my goals, one of the things I want to be able to continue to enjoy the work that I'm doing. And I'm having a blast. I'm totally enjoying being here and working with colleagues and being able to think strategically about the university and what our goals are, and being at the forefront of helping to create that strategic plan. I want to ensure that certainly as a university, on all sectors, faculty, staff, students, our external partners, that they know that Maryville is very committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and that the doors of access and opportunity for students, all students, especially students of color, that the university is there, and that we support that wholeheartedly. But I think much of the work in terms of taking the time and being very intentional, not checking boxes, not feeling like it's a one and done, understanding really that the work is just beginning. We've done a lot of great things here at the university, and there's a lot more that can be done. I just really appreciate being in a space, being at a university and organization that is behind it and that is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It shows up when we say that we want to begin to look at bias, and we want to be able to go into each of the departments and to have collective conversations with professional development for faculty and staff, where we have breakout sessions and can have the conversations, and that people are showing up in numbers. And the fact that people are being accountable to creating their own ideas within their departments that support the work of diversity and inclusion. And so how can we have a very seamless view and understanding of DEI and the work, and that each of us has an opportunity to serve and show up in that way. And so my hope, certainly, and my goals around creating more opportunities for other people to come to the table, for people to collectively come up with different ideas and how they will lead, no matter what role they're in at the institution, and that we do this work together.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as well that part of this is you're also teaching in the School of Education.
I am.
And the smile on your face tells me that you're enjoying that too, right?
I am. Teaching, was my first love, because I started out as an elementary teacher in the heart of New Orleans, and I saw where, the lack of education, and at that time, Louisiana was like next to the lowest on the pole of education, and passing rates or test scoring rates, and just experiences that they were providing for the students. But it wasn't because those students didn't want to learn. It wasn't because their families didn't want them to have those opportunities. So for me to be back in the classroom to work with practicum students who are learning how to be teachers in diverse settings, I love that. I'm all in on that. The faculty there, they have been absolutely wonderful and just instrumental in their commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion as they engage with their students and being intentional about that. You see it in the conversations, and I see it when I'm out in the classrooms in the city, when I'm looking at the practicum and observation of those students, that we're doing it right here for sure. So I love being over there in the School of Ed.
Well, that's great. Well, I know that they're lucky to have you, and our School of Education has a long history of real engagement in the St. Louis school system and in the communities around us, and I know we've got literally thousands of teachers and administrators spread throughout the region, because everywhere I go, I encounter a principal or a department chair or a few teachers that, hey, I went to Maryville.
Absolutely.
And it's always great to see that. We know they've gotten a great education.
Great education, absolutely.
What is it like to have such a large and diverse staff of people and set of responsibilities on an hour-to-hour basis? And now you're VP of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. You're working with a tremendous amount of people, but they are not people that are reporting directly to you. So you've gone from I've got all these people reporting to me to I'm working with all these people. But has that been a challenge, or has it been just an interesting transition?
Both. Yeah. It is different because it's the first time in my 30 years of higher ed that I have not had a staff per se, right? Even when I was a grad student, I had a staff, right? And so at first I was like, "Ooh, yay!" But then I kind of went through a period where I was like, "Oh, wow, I miss my team of folks, my folks," right? But then I began to think about how you define that. And as I, was in the School of Ed and working with my colleagues there, as I'm chairing the Diversity, and Inclusion Council, as I think about the President's Advisory Council. So I have a team of colleagues. I just have multiple teams now, right? And so I'm enjoying this new journey that I'm on as a professional in higher ed. I'm loving it because I'm one of those professionals that I love a variety of things to do, right? I like to have my hands in this, my hands in that, and that helps to complete me. I thrive on that type of work. And so to know that there are multiple teams that I'm able to partner with and to work alongside with. I love the ideation that I have, for example, the School of Business. We're creating the first DEI inclusion symposium for the School of Business, and to sit down with Dr. Gann and Dr. Boyd and to talk about that program and that experience that they'll have for their students with DEI, and that work, phenomenal. Conversations that I'm having in nursing, athletics with the coaches. And so I'm having all these different conversations and touch points where these experiences are coming about here at the institution that really just continues to expand the reach of diversity and inclusion with faculty, staff, and with students. So I'm loving it. I'm having a ball.
What's the one thing that on a personal level has changed the most now that you're not VP of Student Life?
There's a lot of things that have changed, but probably the one thing is that I can sleep more peacefully at night.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, being on duty, and it's the first time that I've never not had to carry like a pager. So I'm telling you how long ago that was when I first started, or being on call for duty, because you just never know what call you're going to get in the middle of the night, and just the worries that you have. As I said, it's the job that's really A to Z. It encompasses everything that touches the university or a student's life. And so I finally can sleep peacefully. And that didn't happen right away. I mean, it kind of took me a while, because there would be times in the evening when I transitioned over that I still would check my phone in the middle of the night. And I'm like, you don't have to do that anymore. So that probably would be the one thing. And I'll admit that at first I missed it a little bit, but I'm settling in for sure.
Well, to those of our listeners who are not in higher education, Nina can attest to this fact. Most student issues do not happen between the hours of 8 and 5.
Absolutely.
They happen at off hours, and so the need to be on call is always there. Well, Dr. Caldwell, the work you've done here is outstanding. The work you will do in the
Thank you.
future is equally, if not more, outstanding. And we're excited to see all the great things that you're going to be leading here in the DEI space. And hopefully in the months to come, we can touch base again and hear about all those achievements. But I want to thank you for not just your great service here at the institution all these years, but the amazing leadership you've shown. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to future years and working with you as well.
Great. Well, that's another episode of Disruptor in Chief. We're going to be back at a later date with some incredibly famous and renowned person like Dr. Caldwell. We haven't figured out yet who that'll be. Maybe it'll be Dr. Eddie Glaude. Who knows? Maybe it'll be
nice.
Oprah Winfrey, but we'll give it a shot. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for Disruptor in Chief. Please share this episode with people in your network who might benefit from it. We'll see you next time.